Hello, marketers, sales teams, and revenue generators. Welcome to the Rising Phoenix Consulting Show. My name is Melissa Rogozinski, and I am the founder and senior consultant at RPC Strategies. Today's guest is Scott Cigich, a senior executive with 20-plus years experience in B2B and B2C sales, specifically in the fintech space. Scott is here to discuss trade show strategy with us. Hi, Scott. Welcome to our show.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks for having me today, and a big happy 2020 to you and everyone.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. So, Scott, I mentioned a little bit about your sales background at a high level, but why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit more about you and how your career has progressed in sales?
Sure, Melissa. Absolutely. I have 20 years plus experience as a senior sales executive with a bunch of different tech companies here in Austin. I started my career with a company called T-Mobile, moved to Dell, and then helped a partnership gain traction with another company into an acquisition called SecureNet. The partner was BigCommerce here in Austin, which is an e-commerce shopping platform. And I actually helped to migrate all of our inside sales team over to the company that acquired us, which was WorldPay. And then we were acquired again within the next following year by a company called Vantiv. And during that time, I worked for channel development of all the partnerships in the United States here. So definitely a lot of experience in the sales aspect of things with business development in fintech, but also have a lot of technology sales experience as well with partnerships and integrations. So definitely excited to be here and talk more about our strategies with you guys.
So by now, most businesses have prepared their budgets and revenue projections for this year. And one of the biggest spending considerations is events. So trade shows, conferences, whether you're doing your own events, things like that. But the big question is this: how much revenue is a company actually going to be able to generate as a direct result of their investment into a trade show? So we have 6 pain points we're going to discuss and some ideas on how to overcome those. So let's dive right in. So our first pain point is having no clear objectives or executive buy-in for a particular trade show. So basically, which trade shows are you attending and why? Scott, you want to talk to us a little bit more about objectives and why executive sponsorship is so important?
Absolutely. So executive sponsorship is of the utmost importance because we have to have that initial buy-in from what we're doing from a business standpoint all the way down through the organization, through marketing, through sales, all of that. Trade shows are utilized and used for a whole bunch of different things. One of the main things is generating actual leads for the business, as well as making sales. That's typically what most trade shows are for. But there's also a couple of other aspects of trade shows that businesses use. Branding exposure is one of them, and the other one is debuting a new product. A lot of technology companies come out with products all the time, and they want to debut the product at the trade show itself. So it's good to have that plan and that buy-in from the top all the way down through the organization.
Great. So you talked about the objectives, obviously generating leads, branding and exposure, and showing a new product or a new technology or a new version of something. But in order to do that, we also have to have enough time to plan for a trade show. And I know, I've had my own event planning business in the legal tech space, and whether it's a 1-hour program or a 3-day conference or anything in between, you definitely need a minimum of 3 months, but probably more like 18 to 24 months to plan, especially for a larger trade show. And if you're not budgeting enough time, you're going to run into a lot of issues. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about how time affects the success of a trade show?
Absolutely. So with the timing of trade shows and with regards to budget overall, there's a significant amount of cost savings that happens if you set up for a trade show 9 to 12 months out versus right before the show. Obviously, you can save quite a bit of money if you are setting your show up sooner rather than later. A lot of the times too, you'll see a lot of different show services that we have to use when we go to these trade shows, like internet, electrical. Is there carpet for the booth? Is there not? You know, lead scanners is another one that Melissa is going to get into. But all of those things are super important when it comes to understanding what are we looking for at our trade show for our sales team and for our marketing executives that are going to be there. One thing I wanted to kind of throw out there, and this was from a trade show I went to this last year, was booth placement too. So you get obviously better booth placement when you have something that, or you set up a show that is 9 to 12 months out versus right leading up to the show. We actually, unfortunately, had a situation where we set up right before the show, and lo and behold, we're next to it was like a game show of sorts, and they had the loudest spinning wheel that you could ever imagine. And so while we were having our dialogue and our conversations with our potential partners and clients, we had this loud noise in the background, and that could have been you know, dismissed had we had set the show up, you know, sooner. So learn by examples. That's my mishap, but I'm just saying set this stuff up well in advance so you don't have to run into those situations.
Yeah, and I think for marketing and sales both, we have different objectives, and we're going to get into that with the next pain point. You mentioned, because the sales team is there at the trade show. You're the ones who are generating the leads. And so there's all these things that we have to think about prior to the time that you get there, because you're the face of the company, and make sure that you have your needs met so that you can accomplish the business goals. One of the things that marketing needs to do is also have enough time to adequately promote your attendance at the trade show. Or as we talk a little bit later, there's alternatives to the trade show, but we have to have enough time to promote our presence there to make sure that people are aware we're going to be there, and to coordinate, you know, opportunities to meet those people. So let's talk a little bit about the disconnect between marketing and sales. And I'm kind of excited about this because it's actually the reason that you and I met. I'm marketing, your sales, and we were introduced by somebody else because there was a particular business goal you wanted to accomplish. And you and I actually spent 2 months discussing that goal and different marketing vehicles and what we believed we needed, what probably wasn't the right fit, and then putting together the best possible roadmap in order to accomplish that business goal before we ever took that strategy to a decision maker. And it's just critical that marketing and sales are communicating and properly aligned for any business goal purposes. So Scott, why don't you dive a little bit more into that as it relates to trade shows?
As everyone understands in the industry and in any industry, sales and marketing are hand in hand, or should be hand in hand. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. Sometimes they're siloed, and it's very important to be transparent as a leader within the company, whether it be from the sales side or the marketing side. And to Melissa's point, this is kind of where we had discussed and met on numerous different strategies to potentially utilize her skill set along with who we had internally for marketing. So it was a big picture of connections that were going to help with our strategies going into the next year. So I thought it was a very good exercise during the time we were having these discussions. Early and often, I was engaging the executive level folks that need to actually have the buy-in and have the understanding of what we're looking to do potentially. So have those discussions early on prior to any type of decisions that are happening. Because discussions are great, but you have to have the buy-in from the overall leaders. And that kind of brings me into making sure that, you know, from my standpoint, also from Melissa's standpoint, you know, there's internal and external consultant alignment within companies. You have your internal folks that are working on all the things they have to work on for the trade shows and sales and all that stuff. But you also have the external consultant coming in with potential opportunities to help with the overall strategy and the business plan. So super important. And that's where Melissa and I met initially. And that's another reason why we're doing this video, just to kind of teach and show you guys what we went through to get everything set up for some of these discussions that we had. So.
Thanks, Scott. So that really leads us into, we're talking about marketing and sales, and that, you know, segues nicely into the next pain point, number 4, which is making sure that marketing and salespeople have creative freedom. Because when you're planning for a trade show, there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things that need to come together. But ultimately, the marketing and salespeople need to have good communications about how to design promotions, so that they're both on the same page about those communications, especially when the sales team gets to the trade show. They know what's been communicated and what's been promoted, the messaging and the branding that they're working with. And by the time they hit the trade show floor, the sales team should be very comfortable that they have the support of marketing and the executives to accomplish those goals. When they get there to the trade show, they're the ones who are in the hot seat, and they need to have some creative freedom in real time to work with the people that are coming by the booth, or whatever else is creating leads at a trade show. So you want to add to that a little bit, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, along the lines of planning, it's communicating out to the masses or the people that are going to be at the show that, hey, we're going to be here. If you'd like to have discussion, if you'd like to have dialogue, then let's set up a time to meet, and you can kind of schedule stuff through there. The other thing that really helps a lot, which a lot more people are doing now, is utilizing social media prior to the show. So blasting out to your social media followers and also the other folks that you want to meet with that you're going to be there and you'd love to meet. You could do a mass email out to a certain user base if you want to with kind of a generic message, or you can personalize it if you're really wanting to talk with a client. The other thing I wanted to say real quick too was something that we've done in the past that really hit with regards to building the partnerships and the relationships more were some giveaways, some contests with some prizes. It kind of it puts a little competitive nature to it. Obviously from a sales perspective, we're competitive by nature, but with regards to these giveaways, it also brings in more relationships because people want to talk with you more, not just about the contest, but it gives you the opening to have more dialogue. So those are 2 points leading up to the show and at the show where you can be super creative and do a lot of different things to generate more business.
No, and I liked your point too about what we're putting out on social media. Obviously the business has social media, but your sales team probably has social media too. And I'm not recommending using personal social media profiles, but if you have a LinkedIn, you have a Twitter, an Instagram that is used for, and you've got business connections, the sales team might want to consider repurposing the marketing content to their own profiles as long as it's business related, especially because, again, they're the ones who are going to be there on the trade show floor. But let's go ahead and move into number 5. And this is a fun one for me. So number 5 pain point is not having enough budget to cover the cost of a booth and additional activities. So especially when we're talking about a trade show, whether it's a 1-day or 3-day conference, you could easily spend between $40,000 and $100,000 or more, depending on the show and what your goals are. And that's a lot of money. So if you don't have the proper budget to do this right, there are alternatives. You can still have a presence at the trade show, but you don't actually have to rent a booth if you don't have the budget for it. So Scott, dive into some of the things that we've talked about that would be fun alternatives for this.
And they are fun alternatives. I will say that. The one that I do a lot of is backpacking. So backpacking is minimal cost, right? So you send one of your top sales executives out to the actual show itself. Let him kind of schedule who the partners that he wants to talk with, to have dialogue with. And then basically you can schedule meetings prior to the show. You can go booth to booth, but literally it's just you feeling out everyone that's there and having dialogue and conversation with all the different opportunities that are out there. And the other thing too is, if you want to bring people together, you don't necessarily have to have a booth to do that. You can do host a happy hour outside of the show itself, right? So find a local establishment where you can have dialogue with, these business owners or these partners, where it's a little bit, you can let loose a little bit from the actual show, because shows can be a little grueling with all the people that are walking around on day one. And it's challenging to have some of those deeper conversations that you want to have. But you can definitely do something like that if you're under a budget, or you're being budget conscious, basically. So that's my personal favorite, backpacking.
Hey, you know what? And I've had experience with that too. I had a client that engaged me for a 1-year project, and they sent me on a backpacking expedition once, instead of having a booth. And we looked at this trade show, I went as an attendee. We knew who the vendors, we knew the attendees, and we went through that, and we had a very specific strategy on who we wanted to meet with and why. And so I was able to accomplish all of those goals just backpacking. And we actually ended up finding out some pretty important intelligence about a competitor just through some of the casual conversations I was having. Another idea besides a happy hour, I did this a couple times. It was wildly successful. I had an all-day conference, and the day before, I had planned to take a handful of people ziplining. So some of the first attendees that registered, speakers, vendors. So I had a select group of about 15 people or so. And so the day before, instead of doing like a happy hour, I took these 15 people on a ziplining tour. And it was great because everybody, they weren't thinking with their business hats. They were just enjoying each other personally. And it was so much fun to go ziplining. And it totally created that stickiness with that group. So when they walked in the next day to the workshop, you could feel their energy and their excitement from just the relationships they had built the day before. And that launched the workshop the next day, and that just built throughout the day. And so we had a very successful conference. So lots of fun, creative ideas that are alternatives to spending a lot of money at a trade show if you don't really have the budget for it. So let's go ahead and move into the final pain point. It's one thing to make sure you have the right objectives, make sure you have enough time to plan. You've got your marketing and sales team properly aligned and communicating and collaborating. You've given them creative freedom on how to create messaging and how to conduct themselves in real time when they're on the trade show floor. We've talked about alternatives to sponsoring a booth, but all of this is for naught if you have poor follow-up on your leads. So I get real excited about this. I think one of the big things is to use a business card scanner. Trade shows, somebody will, have scanners and you can pay for them. They can be kind of expensive, but your CRM should have a business card scanner. And if you don't, it's easy to find one, but find a business card scanner so that, whether you have a booth or you're backpacking or you're setting up meetings or you're doing some other alternative, collect all these business cards, scan them in, make sure that it's synced to your CRM so it creates a lead record, and create a workflow using marketing automation that automatically triggers an email that goes out and says, hey, it was so nice to meet you at this show. I look forward to following up, so that they get an automatic email from your person. They've already gotten that first touch, but also my workflow is a two-step process. It also has a trigger that it sends me a task reminder email that, hey, you need to follow up with this person in a couple of days. So that's my big ticket item for making sure we have good lead follow-up at anything that we're doing. Scott, I'm going to let you jump in and add your point of view, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the being disorganized and weak lead follow-up, it's super important. You always have to debrief, and you have to follow up within a week. One of the things that I like to do while I'm having these conversations, and whether it's at the happy hour or whether it's on the trade show floor, is try to set up the meeting while you're speaking with them. If you're really hitting it off with this person or these people or these companies, and they're really liking who you are as a person, who's to say you can't just set up a meeting right then and there with your phone? I mean, everyone has a calendar on their phone. It's right there. Just say, hey, I'm open next week, Wednesday at 1:30 Central Time. Does that work for you? We can have a little bit further discussion at that point. So that actually will help with setting that meeting up. So let's say you get back and you thought the conversation went well with them, and you reach back out and all of a sudden crickets, because we've all been to the trade shows where you have all the cards, you have the good dialogue, and then all of a sudden just nothing. And you have to keep following up. But all I'm saying is get that buy-in early and often with them, and create that relationship so you can keep going with the actual contact, because it's all about the contact after the show and following through with the actual dialogue very quickly. You don't want to wait too long. Everything happens so fast at the show itself. The follow-up is so important though. So yeah, just to hit the nail on the head, Melissa, just always debrief with the actual flow of the leads within your CRM, as you mentioned, and then follow up, get it set up early and often.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. So we have talked about 6 trade show pain points and how to build the road to revenue. So just as a quick recap, number 1, make sure you have clear objectives. Number 2, make sure you have plenty of time to plan for the trade show. Number 3, make sure that you have properly aligned marketing and sales and that they are communicating and collaborating together. Number 4, give your marketing and sales team creative freedom in the messaging, the branding, and especially when they're on the trade show in real time, to be able to conduct themselves the way they feel is best in order to accomplish the business goals. And then number 5, if you don't have enough budget to do it right, consider several of the alternatives that Scott and I mentioned, because you could still accomplish your business goals just as well. And then number 6, the most important one, make sure you're following up on your leads in a very thoughtful and intentional manner. Scott, you want to add anything else to this?
Of course. Have fun. While you're at the shows, have a good time. Enjoy yourself. Smile. People like people that they get along with. And it's one of those things where, yes, we're doing a job, we're doing work, but have fun while you're doing it. And one of the things that I've learned is while you're having fun doing it, you'll actually build more lasting, meaningful connections with these people that you're running into with regards to the partners and the clients. Everyone likes to build these meaningful connections, because one of the biggest things that I've learned is while you're walking these shows, leave your footprint on the show. People remember people. And that's so important to understand, that when you get the buy-in from someone because they like you as a person, of course they're going to have more dialogue on the actual business that you have and the product that you potentially can offer. So just keep that in mind. Have fun, build lasting, meaningful connections. Even if it's short, just build them, and then leave your footprint on the show, because people do remember people.
Well, folks, that wraps up our video interview with Scott Cigich on 6 trade show pain points and the road to revenue. RPC would love to help you with your business growth goals and your trade show strategies. So please use the contact information at the end of this video to let us know how we can help you. And remember, #make it happen.
RPC Strategies is an intelligent and energetic team of consultants who design marketing, sales, and growth strategies. Don't forget to engage with us on social